If you've ever wondered why the same problems keep showing up on your bike, even though you service it on time, you're not imagining it. There are things mechanics see early, things they only mention later, and things the inspection sheet never tells you. Today, I want to walk through what usually gets said, what stays quiet, and how riders slowly give up control without realizing it. Stick with me to the end, because once you see how this works, you'll never walk into a service counter the same way again. When feel and reality don't match. Every rider trusts the feel of a bike, because that feel has carried them through thousands of miles and countless roads. But the reality underneath that confidence is far stranger than most realize. A motorcycle never tells the whole truth through the bars. It only tells the part your senses can interpret, and sometimes that message is misleading. You lean, the bike follows, and it feels like instinct. Yet instinct is only the surface layer of a deeper mechanical story. Take countersteering. Every rider does it, but almost no one thinks about it. To go right, the bars must first nudge left, letting the bike drop into the lean that actually creates the turn. It feels backwards, it sounds backwards, yet it is the foundation of two-wheel stability. Even riders who have spent 40 years crossing states still rely on muscle memory rather than mechanical truth. The bike responds to lean, not to pointing the wheel. That difference shapes every moment on the road, especially when the pavement changes or fatigue sets in. Front-end feedback complicates things even further. A shake at low speed sometimes feels like worn bearings, though it is often just the tire finding balance. A slight drift in a corner can feel structural, yet it is usually the suspension settling. Feel hints at truth, but it never guarantees it, and that divide leads directly into the next one. When old-school instincts misfire on modern machines, experience shapes how riders interpret a bike's behavior, and years spent tuning carburetors or adjusting cables build instincts that once served flawlessly. Modern machines, however, speak a different language. Electronic fuel injection, ride-by-wire throttles, and intricate sensor networks change how engines respond to stress or hesitation. What once felt like a clogged pilot jet might now be a throttle position sensor hunting for data. What sounded like a lean condition decades ago might be software pulling timing to protect the engine. These shifts create a quiet trap where familiar symptoms point to unfamiliar causes. Many riders trust the throttle as their main diagnostic gauge, because older machines responded directly to every wrist movement. Today's systems filter each input through mapping tables and protective logic. A brief hesitation might feel like fuel starvation, yet it is often the computer smoothing an abrupt transition. The machine manages the rider as much as the rider manages the machine, and that shift alters how problems present themselves. That mismatch between instinct and electronic reality creates confusion when diagnosing trouble. A bike can feel sick without being in danger, or it can hide a serious fault behind smooth software intervention. The old cues no longer align with new machinery. Understanding this gap matters, because every assumption built on outdated experience sets the stage for frustration. And that challenge leads naturally into the quiet adjustments shops rarely mention. Before we dig deeper into the parts mechanics rarely explain, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts below. It helps keep real riders informed, and lets this kind of honest breakdown reach the people who need it. The simple adjustments shops rarely mention. Some of the most important things a rider can do to keep a bike healthy cost almost nothing. Yet these steps seldom appear on service conversations. Clutch free play drifts as the cable warms and stretches, and a simple adjustment can prevent premature slip. Throttle cables develop slack that dulls response long before it becomes obvious. Chain tension changes with load, angle, and mileage, and correcting it early extends both sprocket life and bearing health. These are quiet fixes that protect the machine without draining the wallet. Many shops simply do not mention these adjustments unless they become problems, partly because they are quick to perform and generate little revenue. A worn cable that needs replacement is billable, but a basic tweak that restores proper feel is not. The same logic applies to shifter angle and lever geometry. Riders often adapt to discomfort until it becomes normal, never realizing that a 5-minute change could restore smooth control and eliminate long-term strain on joints and linkage. Shops are not hiding these details out of malice. The business model simply rewards bigger repairs. Quick adjustments rarely make the invoice, yet these small tasks shape how a bike behaves under load, during long rides, or when fatigue creeps in. Understanding them restores control to the rider and narrows the gap between feel and mechanical truth. This understanding leads directly into today's handling challenges ahead. Everything I personally use to maintain my bikes is linked in the description. Take a second to look. Then let's keep going. Modern handling problems that don't mean what they used to. Handling problems today do not always signal the same issues they did on older machines. Modern frames are significantly stiffer, and that rigidity transfers road feedback straight to the rider. Low-profile touring tires sharpen response, but punish small mistakes, creating sensations that once pointed to loose components. Rake and trail have evolved to balance stability with agility, and those changes alter how a bike behaves under braking and mid-corner corrections. What feels like instability might simply be the new geometry, communicating more directly than riders are accustomed to. Weight distribution also plays a larger role than many expect. Fuel placement, engine layout, and accessory load shift, how the chassis settles at speed. A touring machine with a full trunk can react to crosswinds in ways that older platforms never exhibited. None of this signals failure. It reflects a new balance point engineered into the design. Understanding these forces prevents misdiagnosis and keeps riders focused on what truly needs attention. These differences mean that familiar sensations no longer point to the same mechanical sources. A wobble might come from tire profile, not bearings. A vague corner entry might stem from modern suspension tuning rather than worn components. New machines express their limits differently, and learning that language preserves confidence and safety. With this foundation in place, it becomes easier to understand how shop practices and pressures shape the experience riders face next. How mechanics detect problems. Before riders notice anything. A service technician can often sense a problem long before the rider feels anything unusual. It is not magic, and it is not superiority. It is repetition. A tech hears the same cam chain noise on 20 bikes in a single week, while a rider hears it once every few years. That creates an uneven understanding of early failure signs. The difference is not intelligence. It is exposure. When a technician rides a machine around the lot, they listen for patterns that have burned themselves into memory. A faint knock at idle, a slight rasp under load, or a muted clunk during downshifts can indicate problems that experienced riders may not perceive until they worsen. The human ear calibrates itself through familiarity, and technicians live inside that familiarity every day. This advantage also comes from the flow of service history. A shop sees which components fail at which mileages, and they learn the rhythm of those failures across dozens of machines. Riders may only own a few bikes over a lifetime, and their mental database matches their personal experience rather than a full industry sample. The imbalance is structural, not personal, and it explains why a technician can identify trouble before any obvious symptom appears. That edge shapes the entire service conversation, and it leads directly into how free inspections frame expectations from the moment a bike enters the shop. How free inspections shape the conversation from the start. A free inspection seems harmless. It feels like a courtesy, a simple gesture to make sure nothing dangerous is hiding under the chrome, but the inspection process does more than identify issues. It establishes authority by handing the technician a checklist that defines the entire conversation. Once a rider agrees to a free inspection, the technician controls the narrative. The sheet organizes the bike into categories: brakes, fluids, suspension, electrical, tires, bodywork. Each section carries potential recommendations, and once those recommendations exist on paper, they become conversations the rider must navigate. The psychology is subtle. A free service creates an unspoken expectation of reciprocity. Riders often feel compelled to take at least one recommendation because the inspection feels like a favor. Shops understand this dynamic, and the checklist is built to maximize opportunities to suggest maintenance. The process is not malicious. It is a business structure designed to increase consistency and revenue. But that structure also nudges riders into decisions they might not have made otherwise. A shop presenting 8 recommended services looks authoritative, even if only 2 require immediate attention. The inspection defines the entire interaction, and that framing sets the stage for how information is presented and withheld. This naturally transitions into the problem of silence on early issues. The profit of silence. Why some early issues go unmentioned. Some problems do not get mentioned during routine service, even when a technician notices them. A small weep around a gasket, a faint tick from a bearing, or slight play in a linkage may not appear on the inspection sheet. These issues are real, but addressing them early takes time and yields little revenue. Waiting until the problem escalates creates a larger billable repair. Silence becomes profitable, not because anyone intends harm, but because the economic structure rewards reactive work more than preventive care. A technician may notice early belt wear, but choose not to raise the concern until it becomes undeniable. A tiny oil seep may get ignored until it grows into a replacement opportunity. This dynamic is not malicious. It is simply aligned with the incentives built into the service department. Preventive maintenance often saves the rider money, while major repairs drive business, revenue. Shops operate under pressure to meet monthly goals, and smaller tasks do not move the needle. The silence surrounding early issues grows from that pressure. Riders assume that no news means good news, but in many cases, no news means the issue has not yet reached the threshold of profitability. This selective communication flows directly into how shops evaluate riders and tailor their recommendations based on perceived experience. How shops read. Riders in seconds. A service counter learns to read riders quickly. The person who walks in wearing worn gloves and speaking in precise mechanical language gets a different conversation than the rider who arrives unsure of what a symptom means. Staff look for cues: the bike's condition, the gear the rider wears, the questions they ask, and the confidence in their voice. These details shape the tone and intensity of service recommendations. A rider who appears technically fluent may hear only the essentials. A rider who seems uncertain may receive a long list of possible issues presented with urgency. This is not deception. It is sales psychology, driven by the same instincts used in any service industry. Confidence discourages upselling, while uncertainty invites detailed explanations that often lead to larger repair orders. Even posture matters. A rider who leans on the counter and uses specific terms signals that they are not easily persuaded. A rider who asks whether a noise is normal signals vulnerability. Service departments adapt instantly because these patterns repeat daily. The pitch is customized before the bike is even on the lift. The moment a shop reads a rider, the entire experience changes. Some riders receive minimal recommendations because they seem independent. Others receive extensive lists because the shop interprets hesitation as an invitation. These instinctive assessments influence every line on the invoice. Understanding how that judgment develops prepares riders for the broader structural forces explored in the next section of this story. The quota system behind service departments. Service departments operate under pressure most riders never see. Each month begins with targets that come from far above the shop floor. These targets set expectations for labor hours, parts sales, and overall revenue. A department that falls short risks losing bonuses, preferred inventory, and sometimes staffing stability. That pressure shapes every recommendation riders hear. What sounds like urgency may simply be the shop trying to stay afloat under a corporate system designed around financial output rather than mechanical necessity. When a rider brings in a bike for a simple service, the service manager already knows how many hours must be sold that week, and that expectation filters down to the technicians. No one enjoys pushing work that is not essential, but hitting those numbers becomes a requirement for survival. As manufacturers introduce new models with expensive components, the pressure increases. Warranty reimbursements rarely cover the full labor required, so shops must make up the difference through additional repair orders. The result is a system in which recommendations can drift from practical to profitable. Riders often feel the rising intensity of these suggestions without understanding the invisible demands behind them. The industry built this structure, and shops are left to execute it. This environment sets the stage for the next challenge: the specific repair categories that quietly generate the most revenue. If you want more straight talk about how the industry really works and how to stay ahead of the hidden costs shops never highlight, make sure you subscribe. There's far more to uncover, and every rider deserves the full truth before the next service visit. The repairs that make the most money. Certain repairs carry margins that make them appealing to service departments. Brake flushes, for example, cost little in materials yet bill as a full service. Fork rebuilds command high labor rates and create opportunities to sell seals, bushings, and fluids at markup. Alignments and balance services are quick to perform, but priced as premium maintenance. Even accessory installations, often framed as optional upgrades, keep the shop profitable when other categories slow down. These repairs are not fraudulent. Many are genuinely beneficial. The problem arises when they are presented as critical long before mileage or wear conditions justify urgency. A rider may hear that a brake flush is needed at every service, even though use and climate dictate real intervals. A fork service might be suggested at a fraction of the hours older machines endured without issue. An alignment might be recommended after a small suspension change that does not truly affect geometry. The logic is simple. These jobs strengthen the shop's financial position. The recommendations sound authoritative because they come from a professional source, and riders often agree because the consequences of declining a suggested repair feel uncertain. This blending of genuine value and financial motive leads directly to the next issue: modern electronics that make it difficult for riders to challenge or verify what they are told. The ECU and diagnostics black box. Modern electronics create a barrier between riders and the machines they own. Error codes appear without clear explanation, and intermittent faults come and go with no predictable pattern. Mapping software manages fuel and timing in ways that riders cannot observe directly. When a light flashes on the dash, the bike rarely explains the cause with useful detail. Instead, the machine directs the rider to seek service. That lack of clarity pushes riders back to the dealership because only the shop has the tools to read the code and interpret its meaning. The technician may find that the issue is minor, such as a temporary sensor spike, yet the warning light will have already created anxiety. Even experienced riders who spent decades tuning carbureted machines find themselves unable to diagnose electronic problems without specialized scanners. This dependency grows each year as manufacturers add more layers of software and sensors. The opacity itself becomes a source of vulnerability. Riders cannot see what the machine is doing. They cannot confirm whether a recommendation is based on imminent failure or a momentary glitch. This lack of transparency gives the service department control over the narrative, even when the shop is honest and careful. Once that dynamic is established, the relationship between rider and dealership shifts in subtle ways that shape long-term expectations. Those shifts become most visible in the treatment of loyal customers. When loyalty becomes leverage, Long-term customers often believe loyalty earns protection, and in many ways it does. Familiarity can lead to better scheduling, more comfortable interactions, and occasional small favors. Yet loyalty also makes riders predictable. When a shop knows a customer consistently approves recommended services, the communication changes. Suggestions become more frequent. Marginal issues receive more attention. The assumption forms that the rider will rarely question a proposed repair, because the history of agreement speaks for itself. This is not manipulation. It is a natural response to patterns observed over years of visits. The shop interprets loyalty as willingness, and willingness becomes opportunity. Over time, riders may notice that their invoices grow longer, even though their riding habits remain consistent. Familiarity creates a sense of safety, and that safety lowers resistance. A rider who once questioned every line item gradually accepts routine additions. The trust that once protected the relationship begins to tilt toward business leverage. Nothing unethical has happened. The shift is gradual, quiet, and rooted in simple human behavior. Service writers assume the loyal customer values convenience over scrutiny, and recommendations adjust accordingly. Understanding this dynamic is crucial because it marks the point where the rider's relationship with the industry becomes shaped not only by mechanics or machines, but by the entire economic structure behind motorcycle ownership. Why manufacturers quietly prefer bikes that aren't home serviced? Modern motorcycles are engineered with a level of complexity that did not exist decades ago. Specialized Torx fittings, sealed assemblies, and proprietary software locks create barriers between riders and their own machines. These choices are not accidental. They shift maintenance away from garages and toward dealerships, where service departments become the primary source of revenue long after the initial sale. A rider who once handled basic adjustments with simple tools now encounters fasteners that require brand-specific bits or components that cannot be opened without risking damage. Even routine tasks are increasingly wrapped in layers of engineering that discourage do-it-yourself solutions. Manufacturers benefit when riders depend on authorized service. It standardizes outcomes, protects warranty conditions, and funnels money back into the corporate ecosystem. Software adds another layer of control. Critical functions sit behind digital walls, where only dealership tools can access programming or diagnose deeper faults. This design philosophy reinforces brand dependence and reshapes the meaning of ownership. Riders still buy the bike outright, but many aspects of maintenance remain locked behind dealership doors. This shift sets the foundation for the industry's broader economic structure and leads naturally to the pressures felt by the technicians who work inside that system. The mechanics' side, low pay, warranty squeeze, and impossible schedules. Behind every service counter is a technician navigating pressures that riders rarely see. Flat-rate pay systems determine earnings by assigning a fixed number of hours to each job, regardless of how long the work actually takes. If a task is allotted 2 hours but requires 4, the technician is effectively working at half pay. Warranty repairs magnify this problem. Manufacturers often reimburse at rates lower than standard labor, and the allotted times shrink as corporate divisions refine efficiency estimates. These conditions push technicians to work faster than is comfortable, and the resulting stress can lead to burnout. Even highly skilled mechanics face unpredictable days filled with complex diagnostics, customer concerns, and time-sensitive deadlines. The workload builds, and mistakes become more likely when schedules tighten. When riders feel frustrated by delays or inconsistent recommendations, they sometimes direct their anger toward the individual technician. Yet the real pressure originates from labor structures designed to reduce costs at the dealership level. Mechanics absorb the consequences while trying to maintain professional standards under difficult conditions. Understanding their side of the story helps clarify the broader conflict between riders, shops, and manufacturers. That conflict is now spilling into politics, shaping the next major battle over who truly controls a motorcycle after it is sold. The right to repair battle and the political shakeup ahead. Across the country, lawmakers are debating whether riders should have full access to diagnostic codes, service information, and replacement parts. The right to repair movement challenges the growing trend of corporate control over everything from software to specialized tools. State bills aim to guarantee access to onboard diagnostics, prevent manufacturers from locking critical systems behind dealer-only equipment, and ensure that independent shops can compete fairly. These proposals threaten established business models, and lobbying efforts intensify as more states join the debate. Some manufacturers argue that unrestricted access could compromise safety or intellectual property. Riders counter that ownership should grant the freedom to repair and maintain their machines without restrictions. If these laws pass, the repair landscape will shift dramatically. Independent shops could handle more complex work. Riders could diagnose issues without relying solely on dealership scanners. Parts availability might increase, reducing downtime and lowering costs. The current system, built around centralized control, would face its first major structural challenge in decades. Riders have long accepted that modern systems create dependency, but political momentum is beginning to push back. As these debates unfold, riders will need to understand how the outcomes influence not just their maintenance routines, but their overall ownership experience. That realization sets the stage for a new approach to riding and caring for a motorcycle in a changing industry. The new rulebook for riders moving forward. The future of motorcycle ownership will demand a more intentional approach. Riders who understand their machine's behavior, its maintenance needs, and its technological limits will remain in control of both cost and safety. This does not require expert-level mechanical training. It begins with simple awareness. Learning to distinguish electronic quirks from real failures prevents unnecessary panic. Checking small adjustments before each season reduces the risk of expensive surprises. Reading service recommendations with a critical eye helps identify which tasks are urgent and which are optional. These steps reinforce confidence without creating conflict with shops or technicians. Riders can also benefit from documenting each service performed, tracking patterns over time, and learning common issues for their specific model. This practice turns experience into insight. When a recommendation appears, it can be weighed against history rather than guesswork. Building relationships with trustworthy technicians helps bridge the communication gap created by modern complexity. The goal is not to challenge every suggestion, but to participate actively in the conversation. Ownership becomes a partnership rather than a transaction. In a world shaped by changing engineering, evolving labor pressures, and shifting political landscapes, riders maintain power by staying informed. The industry is transforming. Manufacturers push complexity. Shops navigate quotas. Technicians manage impossible schedules. Lawmakers debate access and control. Through it all, riders remain the constant. The road still belongs to those who understand their machines and refuse to surrender their independence. At the end of the day, the bike doesn't lie, but the system around it often stays quiet. The more you understand what's really happening in the shop, the more control you keep as a rider. If this hit home, tap like, subscribe for more, straight talk, and drop a comment with your experience.